Well, the Shroud of Turin is the same. On the left there, we have a photo-negative image, and that's what you're looking at when you look at the Shroud of Turin. When Secundo Pia took a photograph in 1898, his negative was actually a photo positive of the negative on the left. So his negative was actually a photo positive, but not completely, because you can see coming from the crown of thorns the blood, but because this was real blood on the shroud, this was now in photo negative. So there is, on the left, we have a highlighted picture of the face on the shroud with the actual blood on there. That's real blood, type AB, with lots of bilirubin in it, which is what crucified victims had in it because of the torture involved. And on the right, a photo negative, the one on the left is a photo negative, and the one on the right is a photo positive of the negative. But you can see that the blood is now white in colour instead of red on the left, because that is photo negative. Here we have the whole of on the left-hand side, the actual shroud, as you can see from the front. And on the right, you can actually see the image of Jesus Christ on the right. There's the back of the shroud on the left, and when you take a picture of it, your negative will be a photo positive showing the back of Jesus with the scourge marks. Now, just by introducing the possibility of a medieval forger, some people think it's Leonardo da Vinci. Now, how could Leonardo da Vinci, or anybody else for that matter, and why would they produce a mixed photo-negative and photo-positive image in the Middle Ages? Now, how could they, and why would they? And why would they today, for example? Now we're going to look at the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain. Now, it's been extensively researched by Dr. Alan Wanger, who's a professor emeritus of Duke University, and Mark Guskin, historian and author. And the blood on the Sudarium of Oviedo has the same blood group, type AB, as is found on the Shroud of Turin. Now, this blood group, AB, is found in only 3% of the world's population. So Dr. Alan Wanger employed his polarized image overlay technique to study correlations between the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain. And he found 70 points of correlation on the front and of the Sudarium and 50 on the back. So we can make a conclusion here, a scientific conclusion, that the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain and the Shroud of Turin were both used to cover the very same identical corpse, because the blood group and the markings are identical. Now, the importance of the Sudarium of Oviedo is its history. Unlike the Shroud, the Sudarium of Oviedo, its history is very well known. The Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain accompanied Philip and other Christians fleeing Palestine in 616 AD, and they travelled through Alexandria, Egypt, and into Spain at Cartagena. And the Sudarium of Oviedo is now contained in an oak chest, which was entrusted to Leandro, the Bishop of Seville. Now, there's a Spanish magistrate called Juan Moreno, and this is what he has to say on the subject. The scientific and medical studies of the Sudarium of Oviedo prove that it was a covering for the same man whose image is on the Shroud of Turin. We know that the Sudarium has been in Spain since the 1600s. How then can the radiocarbon dating claiming that the shroud is only from the 13th century be accurate? That's a very good question, and we're going to look at that and answer that question, hopefully. Now we're going to look at the Shroud of Turin from a forensic point of view. Dr. Robert Bucklin was a former forensic pathologist in Los Angeles, and he personally conducted over 25,000 autopsies. 25,000 autopsies. You can read about him on shroud.com. And he did some very detailed analysis, which I haven't got time to go through in detail, but he concluded as follows. The forensic pathologist will be aware that the individual whose image is depicted on the cloth has undergone puncture injuries to his wrist and feet, puncture injuries to his head, multiple traumatic whip-like injuries to his back, post-mortem puncture injuries to his chest area, which has released both blood and a water type of fluid. And from this data, it is not an unreasonable conclusion for the forensic pathologist to determine that only one person in history has undergone this sequence of events. That person is Jesus Christ. Now, on the shroud, there's pollen, which proves that the Shroud of Turin was once in Jerusalem. Dr. Max Frey was a member of STIRP, and he was a botanist and Swiss criminologist. In other words, he solved crimes. He took samples from the surface of the shroud in 1973 and 1978, and he identified pollen spores and spores of many different plants that originate only in and around Jerusalem and areas of the Middle East that include the ancient cities of Constantinople and Edessa. There's been some subsequent research, these researchers include Dr. Danin, a botany professor at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Dr. Baruch, a pollen specialist at the Israel Antiquities Authority, Oswald Schurman, and Dr. Alan Wanger. And of the 28 plants found on the shroud, 27 bloom in the springtime, corresponding with the Jewish Passover. Zygophyllum dumosum grows only in Israel, Jordan, and the Sinai. And of the 28 plants, 20 are known to grow in Jerusalem itself, and 8 others grow in the vicinity in the Judean desert or the Dead Sea area. Though some of these plants may be found in Europe, 14 of the 28 plants only grow in the Middle East and never in Europe. Of the 28 plants, 27 bloom in springtime, corresponding with the Jewish Passover. And one plant is Zygophyllum dumosum, for which there is pollen as well as an image. And that grows only in Israel, Jordan, and the Sinai. And this is what Professor Danin of the Hebrew University sums up. He says, this combination of flowers can be found in only one region of the world. The evidence clearly points to a floral grouping from the area surrounding Jerusalem. Conclusion: the Shroud of Turin was at one time in Jerusalem. Now, there's also some dirt on the Shroud of Turin. It's called travertine aragonite. Now, when Jesus fell carrying that heavy crossbeam, he picked up some dirt from the streets of Jerusalem. And you can find that dirt, called travertine aragonite, on the places on the Shroud of Turin corresponding to his nose and his left kneecap, and also both heels. This travertine aragonite has been researched by Joseph Kolbeck in America and Richard Levi Setti, also from America. And these two researchers compared dirt samples taken from the shroud and limestone from ancient Jerusalem tombs. And this is what Joseph Kolbeck says: there may be other places in the world where identical travertine aragonite is found, however, no such places are known. Conclusion: the Shroud of Turin was at one time in Jerusalem. Now we're going to do some detailed analysis of photos of the Shroud of Turin. First of all, the scourging. It says in the scriptures that Jesus was scourged. We cover that in our crucifixion study, but I think you can see very clearly there the scourging over the front and the back of Jesus. Jesus was scourged so that all the skin on his body was ripped off by over 120 different separate lashings. There's a crown of thorns placed over the head of Jesus. It comes from the lote bush, and you can see the blood tracking down from over 70 different places where the thorns from the lote bush pierced Jesus' skull, the skin over his skull. There's fractured nasal cartilages which have been discovered on the shroud. Those nasal cartilages are broken, and that could have either happened during the mocking when Jesus was beaten with rods, or it could have happened when he fell carrying that heavy crossbeam. Now, his hands were nailed, and you can see there that the hands were, we can work out there that first of all, the nail went through the wrist, not through the palms, and we can work out that the position of the hands on the cross were with the thumbs pointing down and the palms against the wood, with the blood tracking down in that position. So that picture there shows the actual correct position of Jesus on the cross. The actual nails went through what's called Desdot's point. We talk about this in our talk on the crucifixion. It's a very specific point, and that's where the nails went through, Desdot's point, which you can feel on the back of your own wrists. Now, in all medieval paintings, you always see the nails going through the palms of the wrist. That's not correct, because that wouldn't support the body of a man. The correct place is in Desdot's point in the wrist, and the place that in the palm is simply not correct. Now, on the shroud, there's a missing thumb. This is simply caused by the weight of the body pulling down on those nails and causing the hands to go into a claw-like position. So if you look carefully, you can only see on the left there 4 fingers and no thumb. 4 fingers and no thumb, and that's how one of the reasons, one of many reasons we know that the shroud is authentic. Now the nails went into the feet. These nails were about 12 inches long and half an inch wide. You can see clearly the blood flowing from those puncture wounds in the feet, in the second intermetatarsal spaces. The right foot was placed against the upright, that's the stipes crucis. The left foot was placed on top, and one nail was nailed through both feet in that position there. There's a spear wound. Remember, Jesus was speared in his side. The spear actually went between his 5th and 6th right ribs. You can see that on the shroud. On the top left picture there, you can see some blood coming from the spear wound, and you can also make out that blood has actually sort of puddled underneath Jesus' back as he was laid in the garden tomb. Now, very importantly, the coins over the eyes date the shroud to the years immediately after 29 AD. Over the eyes, you can make out, if you do some special techniques, which Dr. Alan Wang has done, you can make out that coins were placed over the eyes. It's basically to keep the eyelids shut. And this research was done by Professor Alan Wanger. You can read about him on shroud.com. He's also written an excellent book called The Shroud of Turin. And this is his conclusion. According to Professor Wanger, the different coins over the right and left eye of the shroud were minted by Pontius Pilate in AD 29, which dates the shroud to the years after AD 29. Of course, the crucifixion was in AD 33. Now, I won't go into the exact details of exactly what he found over the right eye and the left eye, but he's quite certain that these are separate coins, both minted in AD 29 by Pontius Pilate. Now we come to some really fascinating stuff, that the shroud has 3-dimensional image properties. And this was discovered by NASA. In the center there, you can see Dr. John Jackson of NASA and his Shroud of Turin research project team. Now, the NASA computer, analyzing computer, was first produced to analyze and produce 3-dimensional images of the moon. What they did was send an orbiting satellite around the moon and take lots and lots of photographs of the moon, and then feed all those separate photographs and images into the computer, and the computer would produce a 3-dimensional image of the moon. Well, the Shroud of Turin has always been controversial, so somebody came up with the bright idea of putting the Shroud of Turin under the VP8 image analyzing computer that NASA used. There's Dr. John Jackson, who's actually a former physics professor at the United States Air Force Academy.